Let's jump back into the California Educator Reporting System. I'm going to use the sandbox because I don't want to jump into your live data. What I want to do is show you how you can organize it right in the California Educator Reporting System so you don't have to necessarily download it as an export. Now, I do still recommend the previous video that you saw possibly yesterday, but I do want you to know that you can use the actual CERS account or California Educator Reporting System and organize student groups right in there. So let's jump in and have a little fun with the California Educator Reporting System and your data. Reminder, you are going to the CASP.org website. Remember, in order to see your data, you would have had to sign your affidavit. Now, I'm assuming that you have, if you already gave a focused interim assessment block or an IAB or an ICA, because you wouldn't have been able to see the actual interim assessments if you didn't sign that affidavit. We are going here, the California Educator Reporting System, or CERS. That's your live data. So we're not going there. But there's a sandbox. So let's go play in the sandbox. Here in the sandbox, if you just want to play around with it, it'll give you elementary sample. It'll give you, maybe you want to see what the school administrators see or the district level sees. You can go there. But let's go to high school this time. And I'm entering the sandbox. And this situation, I'm going to pick ninth grade. Now remember, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade can give an interim assessment. So we'll go into ninth grade. And it's showing me the California Spanish assessment, but I'm going to select that little plus. Let me close it again. There's a plus here. So it gives me other assessments that were given, and I want to select a interim comprehensive assessment, or you can also select other ones. But here it's showing me that if you are a high school teacher and you've given the ICA, which mimics the state test, it's not smarter where it doesn't make the questions easier or harder, but these are sample items of what would actually be on the state assessment. So it's my recommendation that 9th and 10th grade teachers give this assessment at the same time that the 11th graders take their English language arts and their math CASP or SBAC, so that we can look at that data the following year to inform instruction, because we can give the next teachers information to intervene, and you as an educator can look at that information to inform how you are tackling those state standards. Now, you may want to go ahead and select every one of these are the session IDs. So in other words, maybe you gave this assessment on the 23rd, but maybe there were a few makeups. So maybe you gave that makeup on the 30th, for example, of January. Now, of course, you can do this more than once a year, but know that you do have to grade one performance task when you give the ICA. I believe there's only one, and I can do that in another video. So once I select this, typically it'll show like this, and the bottom results are hidden. But what's nice is it gives you the 4 bands. And in these 4 bands, you have exceeded standard, met standard, nearly met standard, and did not meet standard. And we can show the results. Typically, I'm going to refresh this because sometimes for some reason the sandbox isn't, it doesn't give us exactly what we need every time. So let me go back in. We're doing the 9th grade. We're going to get rid of the Spanish, select all these quickly so I don't, so it doesn't take too long. And we want to make sure we see all the students. Okay, great. So you can look at this by student. And what's nice is these drop downs, you can organize it by standard. You can organize it by, if I select this, the did not meet shows up first, but if you select it again, it reorganizes it again. Now, if you wanted to put it back in alphabetical order, you just go over to the student and it will do that for you. The other thing you can do is do it by scale score. So if you remember, if you're a teacher in the Beaumont Unified School District, I gave you the bands. So for 9th grade, for 11th grade, it shows you what the bands are for not met, nearly met, and exceeded. And you can look at this and find out how close the student is to the next band. You can also go ahead and select a student. Let's say all of these students that did not meet, maybe you want to click on to see the responses of the student. So you can look at all of the responses of this particular student. And you can, if you wanted to do small group, maybe you have an intervention teacher that you have on campus, say if it's, especially if it's mathematics and you want to do pull out groups. You also may have a conversation about what you can do differently in the classroom. The other thing that you can do is you can jump into the student data. You can select a particular student and open that information up to see the student's responses. So, for example, this is a student's responses, and you can take this information, you can organize it by claim and target. So, just so you know, in the state of California, the SBAC, even if the claim is not just concepts and procedures, but one of the other three claims, like modeling and data analysis, that it will still say concepts and procedures because there's an assumption that there will always be computational math. However, targets will be listed here. So you can look at, interpret the structure of expression, like Bloom's taxonomy, it's telling you what the student needed to do. You can, so you can organize them by all the targets. And you can organize it also by the standard. So when I see this here, communicating and reasoning, problem solving, concepts and procedures, concepts and procedures, concepts and procedures, these are the 8 mathematical practices. So this is the avenues of thinking for the students. And did they use the proper tools in order to, or could they manipulate that? Maybe it was a graph. Maybe it was base 10, and could they reorganize it? Depending on what the level of the assessment item was. Or maybe it was geometry and they had to look at and create the formula that went along with it. You can also organize it by difficulty level. Like, for example, this student actually got this one right, and it was difficult, and it was target G, create equations that describe numbers of relationships. But this one, the student did not get correct, and it was apply mathematics to solve well-posed problems. So this is where the avenues of thinking come in. You can organize the student by the ones they got wrong. Great for an intervention math teacher to look at this data. And then you can also organize it by the ones they got right. Notice that these that have more than one score, these were probably ones that might have been a part of a performance task if it was a 2-part problem, which brings me to not just looking at the student data, but we can also look at the item data. Now, here is where it's the select a results view. You can select this, you can look at the results by item. You can look at key distractors, and you can look at quantile reports. So if we select the results by item, and in this situation, it should just populate, but for some reason in the sandbox, it wants me to do a few clicks. So some of these, when they show up, you can look at all of the items that show up here, and it tells you what the credit is for each item. When you're in your active data, you will get percentages of full credit here. But what you can do is you can open this window, and it'll tell you what the students did get. You can organize it. These are a great way for you to do intervention groups. When you export this, though, the students don't come down. It just gives you the full data that you see in this screen. But what you can do is an intervention teacher, or say you're doing small group, or say maybe you were given the privilege of working after school, or maybe somebody's doing some type of weekend interventions. This is where you can bring in those small groups, and it might be a 10-minute fix. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that. That's one of the things that's nice about this. The other thing that you can do is you can go to key distractors. And in these key distractors, what's interesting is that this one, for example, right here, these are distractors. Look, there's 2 that they could have gotten. There were 2 answers. So when you export this, you will see that the percentage of students that got this right. Again, the percentages will be there for you when you do when you look in your actual live data, and then you can actually see what students were doing, how they did in this area. Now, You will get quantile reports, which is nice to know because students, by the time they're in a senior or 12th grade, their quantile measure, if they want to go to college, should be between around 1450 to 1600. And 1600 really is that calculus level. But here is something that I found that I was like, oh, this is amazing. On the bottom right, filter by results. You can actually filter some information here. And I was surprised that it actually opened up for me. In the sandbox, it's fickle, but when you're in CERS, in your live data, you can filter it by English learner, English only, English fluent. You can filter it by race and ethnicity. Don't let that scare you. It's not emotional. It's just information, and organize it to see, what can I do for this student group? Maybe it's a student group that moved into the area from out of the country, and you're like, okay, I need to address this differently. There are student groups that actually come to this country that don't have a written language. Can't think of it right now, but that is something to be very cognizant of. So this is really nice to look at, and I do hope that you will use the CERS to really help inform your instruction and to create some intervention groups. I mean, it's kind of exciting. I like the data. You may have lots of questions. You can't break it. Go in. Every teacher at the high school has access. Now, you still have to have a TOMS account to do this. So if for some reason you try to log in and you can't get in, shoot me an email. Ask your site leader, one of your administrators, to make sure you have a TOMS account. We'll get you in the system. You will have to sign that affidavit. But even if you are a history teacher, a physical education teacher, a CTE teacher, you have access. So even if you don't administer it, you can see how the students are doing. Because if you are an engineering teacher and offering that information, you may want to know how the students are doing with their writing, if they have to argue something, or if they need to have some type of mathematics skill to access the content that you're giving them. And if you're a history teacher, maybe you want to see what type of topics they're talking about. So jump into those interim assessment items so that you can see that they might be talking about nuclear fission, and you might want to talk about the history of that. Maybe that's in science as well. Don't let this scare you. Play with it. See what you can do so it can inform what you're doing in the classroom and how you can intervene to help your students. Remember to subscribe, comment, tell me how you're using the interim assessments to inform your instruction and to create intervention groups, and what other things you're doing to talk about in your professional learning communities. And yes, like the video. Thank you so much for watching.